have Jackie Lloyd come up and start with a brief overview, and I apologize with us getting started late, so staff will try to be as short-winded as possible to expedite the remainder of the meeting.
We'll give you the cliff notes.
Again, thank you all for your patience and for being here tonight. I would like to make sure that y'all sign in the back. If you haven't, there's a sign-in sheet so that we can record that you were here tonight. As Doug said, our first agenda item is our agency plan. And the Housing Authority is required by HUD to annually submit an agency plan. And then every 5 years, we're required to submit a 5-year plan. But we're not in the 5-year cycle right now, so we're just working on an annual plan. The annual agency plan is a comprehensive guide to the Housing Authority programs, policies, operations, and strategies for meeting local housing needs and goals. It also serves as a planning and management tool for the Housing Authority. The plan is submitted using a template created by HUD, and Kara is handing that out to everybody just so you see how much information we have to include in that template when we submit it to HUD. The presentations by staff will be parts of the template that are required to be covered, and any proposed policy revisions to our programs. The plan and the proposed policy revisions we will be discussing will be for our next fiscal year, which is July 1st of 2012. So none of this stuff is effective now. I just want to make sure that's clear. This is just stuff that's proposed. It has to go through a process. So anything you hear tonight doesn't apply right now. We're required to get input on the proposed changes from our program participants and our resident advisory board, and we've invited them to attend our board meetings in October, November, December, and January to listen to the plan presentations and to provide comments. Any comments made at the meetings will be recorded. Comments will also be accepted by completing and returning the comment form that Kara has also passed out. I know sometimes people are not comfortable standing up and making a comment, so you have the ability to take that with you, make any comments, and get it back into us. The comments and questions the comments have to be received back by us by March 21st. Any comments made at, any other comments or questions can also be submitted on the city's website or at dmmha@dmgov.org, which is also on that form. If you have any comments to make tonight, as a speaker, you'll have 3 minutes. Please identify yourself and tell us if you are a resident of public housing, a Section 8 participant, or a Section 8 owner, and give your address. Please be sure your comments are germane to the topic that are being presented. We've got a number of staff here tonight that'll be making presentations. I've asked them to identify before they speak what program, because it gets to be a little bit confusing. So they'll say this is for the Section 8 program or this is for the public housing program. Thank you.
Okay, tonight my part of the template, of the agency plan template, is policies governing the public housing program, and what they want to know are policies governing eligibility, selection, and admissions, including deconcentration and waitlist procedures. There are just a few revisions that we're making to the public housing program. Some of them are the same that we made in the Section 8 program that I presented on in November. Under family breakup, we're revising some language under the Violence Against Women Act to say that supporting documentation verifying the dates in relation to the reason for the family breakup will need to be submitted to the agency. And we're also revising some additional Violence Against Women Act language regarding the receipt of a certification. HUD has a certification form. If that is received by the agency does not request additional information. Under joint custody of dependents, we're adding language where in instances where no biological parent can be located, the DMMHA will ask the guardian of the minor child to provide additional documentation acceptable to the DMMHA that verifies the guardian has custody of the minor child. Such documents could be receiving benefits for the child under the FIP, or school records indicating the guardian as the contact person for the child. Under references from landlords, we're adding the following language. For evictions that have occurred within the last year as a result of non-payment of rent, the DMMHA will not deny the applicant if the applicant has successfully completed the RentWise program. Under owing money to the DMMHA or other PHAs, we're revising the language to allow an applicant to repay the monies owed within 60 days or to demonstrate that the balance is no longer currently owed. Under suitability for tenancy, we're adding the language to state that if an applicant has a history of arrests for trespassing on property owned or operated by the DMMHA may, at its sole discretion, deny the application for assistance. Under reporting changes in family circumstances, this one's a little bit longer, but the basic concept of it is how we handle return mail by the post office. And if the applicant has a guardian or a reasonable accommodation for copies to a service provider, instead of immediately retiring the applicant for return mail, we're going to contact their contact person and try to get a new address for them that way. And only if we cannot reach those contact people or they don't know where the applicant is will we retire the application. Under determining family unit size, we're revising language like we did in the Section 8 to state that 2 minor children of the same gender will be required to share a bedroom regardless of age, and children of the opposite gender shall be required to share a bedroom until such time as the oldest child turns 6 years of age. And then we're removing language about children of the opposite gender that are not 5 numerical years apart will not be required to share a bedroom, and adding that children shall be required to share a bedroom with their parent until the child reaches 6 years of age. And then under site-based waiting list, the public housing program has site-based waiting lists so people can apply for which site that they would like to live in or which area. Currently it's which building, but that is switching to zones. And what I have to do every year is analyze from the baseline of when we started the site-based waiting list in 2005 and compare that to the current statistics from 2011. And current statistics reflect just a slight decrease in the number of white applicants from the original base numbers for the majority of all of the sites that we have, and they reflect a slight decrease in the number of disabled applicants for Royal View Manor. Deconcentration, I revised the charts on deconcentration to reflect current statistics, and what deconcentration is that we have to verify that we have our projects are within the deconcentration guidelines of being at or below 30% of the average median income, and 30% of the average median income is $22,650. Currently, all of our projects are under that guideline, so we're meeting the deconcentration requirement. But we are adding additional units back into our inventory, so next year we'll be doing more marketing. We've already kind of started that to ensure that we get meet the deconcentration indicator for next year as well. So that's it for mine. Any comments from the public and from the board? Thank you.
The next up is policies governing grievance procedures and pet policies. We're also going to cover rent determination policies, but we're going to save that till the January meeting because we're still in the process of looking for public input and internally looking at some of the things that fall under that category. So Tonight, I'll cover the pet policies and the grievance procedures. Under the pet policies, which govern public housing, ownership of pets in public housing, we have no recommended changes this year for that. I know last year or the year before we made several different changes, and we won't be making any changes to that this year. Under grievance procedures, the grievance procedures is a description of grievances and informal hearings and reviews that we offer to both our residents and applicants. And we do have recommended changes under that. Under the housing choice voucher informal reviews, which covers applicants to our programs, we're adding that DMHA must be given the opportunity to examine at our offices before the hearing any family documents that are directly relevant to the review within a reasonable time frame, at least 24 hours, and that DMHA must be allowed to copy any such documents at our expense. If the family does not make the documents available for examination on the request of DMHA, the family may not rely on the documents at the review. We're also adding the language, a delay in requesting a file review or copies of file documents will not be grounds for a continuance or rescheduling of a review. And lastly, we're recommending adding if the applicant family is represented by an attorney who comes to an informal review without DMHA's prior knowledge of the representation, the DMHA shall be afforded the opportunity for a continuance, so DMHA legal representation may also be obtained. Then under housing choice voucher informal hearings, this covers participants of our program under the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher program. Are recommending adding the language, in addition to regulatory required informal hearings, DMHA may conduct an informal discussion with the participant, individual or family, prior to them requesting an informal hearing. And this would be done internally prior to scheduling those, and that's kind of our internal attempt to not have the hearings if it's not necessary, not have to go through that process if we can resolve those issues prior to that. We're also recommending adding if the applicant family is represented by attorney, again, that mimics the language that I had indicated we're recommending adding for informal reviews. Under public housing informal reviews and public housing informal hearings, we have no changes since last submission and no recommended changes. And I think that's it for this section. Is there any questions from the board or comments? Any from the public? Okay, thank you.
My name's Mark Gregory. I'm project specialist with Public Housing Agency, and I'll be presenting both the 2012 capital fund application and the 5-year application. I know Jackie said that the agency plan doesn't require a 5-year plan, but the capital fund program does require one each year. The first 2 pages of the 2012 are the summary pages, and the capital fund covers operations, management, and the portions that I oversee are the modernization, which is the actual dwelling structures. And if you go to the second page, line 20, this is the total amount. This is based on the 2011 capital fund. And then you can go to page 3, supporting pages. These are the cost estimations, and some of these are statutory, 20, 10, and 10% of the total grant amount. There's architectural funds, tenant relocation funds. Go to the next page. And then these are the actual modernization items that we're proposing to do should we receive the same level of funding that we received in 2011. Then the last page is the implementation schedule, and again, it's statutory. We have 24 months to obligate these funds and 48 months to fully expend these funds. And that's the 2012. Before we have any comments, we'll go to the 5-year plan. And that's this one at the top. This has a similar layout where this page is the summary page, and it's the figures, again, for the same type of thing, physical improvements, management, operations. And then the next pages, 3 and 4, are supporting pages for the actual physical items. And in these, there are some line items that do not have dollar figures. And we do that because we're allowed through HUD to do what they call fungibility, where we're able to take something from an approved 5-year plan and bring it into, if the need arises sooner, so we can go ahead and complete that work item. And so we try to include as many things in the 5-year plan as what we can hopefully foresee for future work items. And then the last part, pages 5 and 6, again, these are that'd be the next page, some more physical items here. And again, it's the HA-wide management improvements, office equipment, staff training, things of those nature. And that is a lot of information, I know, and if any of the board members would like, you can speak to Jane and she can certainly email these documents to you if you want to peruse them in a little more detail. Are there any questions or comments from any of the board members? Any from the public? Thank you.
Okay, the next item, to be covered are the policy revisions. Some good news on the admin plan. We're going to start with Section 8 first. This is a Section 8 administrative plan. Chapter 2 was about fair housing and equal opportunity. Chapter 3 was eligibility. Chapter 4, applications, waiting list, and tenant selection. And Chapter 5, briefings and voucher issuance, were all covered in November when I did the template presentation. So all of those changes have already been recorded for the board and for the public. Chapter 7 is verifications. We aren't recommending any changes to verifications. Chapter 8 is HQS and rent reasonableness. We're not recommending any changes to that. Chapter 9, general leasing policies, and it will go actually right here. You can go to the summary. Make it really easy on everyone. And Chapter 9, we're revising language under the term of assisted tenancy to allow for possible prorations to the start date of the contract in the event of natural disasters and domestic violence for voucher holders and current participants. Chapter 10 is moves with continued assistance and portability. Portability is where a voucher holder can either have a voucher holder here at Des Moines Municipal Housing Agency and choose to port out of our agency and go anywhere in the United States that has a housing authority, or they can go from any other housing authority to Des Moines, and that's called porting in. HUD came out with a new notice that just had some additional information in it on time frames this year, so we made some revisions to that. Made some revisions on when DMMHA will consider somebody a participant in our program or whether they're coming in as an applicant. And if they're coming in as an applicant, we would require them to reside in our jurisdiction for a full 1 year before allowing them to port back out. And if they're coming as already a participant in another housing authority, we would not require them to reside here for at least 1 year before porting out because they're already currently receiving a Section 8 assistance. The other one is if they were a current project-based voucher participant coming to our agency with a regular housing choice voucher, we would consider them a participant because they'd been under a Section 8 program for over a year, which is what our requirement is, and we would allow them to port back out if their owner would allow them to mutually terminate their lease ahead of 1 year term. And that's kind of a brief summary of all those changes right there. And then the annual updates of the HUD Form 50058, it's a form that must be submitted to Housing and Urban Development. And the new notice that came out, 2011-3, talked about if the DMMHA is being billed by another housing authority. There are certain time frames that they have to get this information to us, the 50058. And if they do not do that within a certain period of time, the maximum period of time is 30 days, HUD is now requiring that the Des Moines Housing Agency contacts the Office of Public and Indian Housing and request that the Office of Public and Indian Housing contact that housing authority and ask them to absorb that voucher because they're past the billing time frame. It used to be housing authorities had to work that out themselves, which was kind of difficult. So we just added that language there. So HUD have helped us out a little bit on that aspect. On Chapter 15, special housing types, those are like shared housing and congregate housing, manufactured homes. We are not making any changes to that except for under the Section 8 home ownership, which after my presentation, Gary will go and then we'll do the rest of Chapter 15. Chapter 17 is project-based vouchers, and we are making a few revisions to that, stating that we were awarded the 50 vouchers and we awarded those to they were awarded out, and additional vouchers may be placed with the category based on the need or demand identified through the RFP process, but will not exceed 20% of the DMMHA program budget authority. Adding the following language under filling vacancies. Upon receipt of a notice of a vacancy, the DMMHA will select the next 3 applicants on the project-based voucher waiting list and process according to the regular housing choice voucher processing steps. That's in an effort to ensure that we can get the vacancy filled as quickly as possible. After determining final eligibility, the DMMHA will promptly refer those families to the project-based voucher owner. And in the event that one or more applicant family has been determined eligible to be referred to the PBV owner at the same time, the applicant family that contacts that owner first will have the first opportunity to accept the unit. It's the same concept as what we do on the public housing program to avoid long vacancies. And under tenant screening, we're revising the language to state that we will conduct screening on the project-based voucher applicants in accordance with Chapter 3, which was eligibility, and which includes our screening criteria. And Chapter 18 of the admin plan is the Veterans Administrative Supportive Housing Program, and we're not recommending any changes to that. On the other chapters, the other staff will come up and present on, but on those particular chapters for the Section 8 Administrative Plan, are there any questions from the board? And from the public? Okay, thank you.
I also have a summary sheet, so it might be easy to follow.
Okay, these all pertain to Section 8 program plan revisions, so I'll kind of go chapter by chapter. Marcy Hardy indicated previously that Chapter 8, HQS and rent reasonableness, there'll be no changes. So we'll move on to Chapter 11, which covers re-examinations. This would be a certification process when the client participants come in on an annual basis and recertify the information that they had given to staff to continue in the Section 8 program. So first, under 11.1b, annual re-exams, we're proposing to add the following language. All household members of the age 18 years and older must attend the re-examination appointment. That's existing language. Our proposal is to add and provide requested verifications, or the individual or family will be subject to termination of assistance for non-cooperation. Next, adding the following language under the same annual re-exams. Owners must submit requests for new leases and or contract rent increases to the family and DMHA 60 days prior to the effective date. And also adding the language, the request for a new lease agreement may be made anytime after the initial lease term. This will replace the language that's currently in our plan, which states that the request of the family to enter into a new lease agreement for a specified term must be made of the family in writing within 60 days prior to the termination date set forth in the lease. Then moving on to Chapter 11. Oh, I'm sorry, we're still in Chapter 11 under effective dates. Just adding the language or signs a new lease. This would pertain to, well, I guess it's probably just as easy to read the statement. If a family moves to a new unit or signs a new lease, the increase will take effect on the effective date of the new lease and HAP contract, and no 30-day notice is required. Again, adding that language again down further, and this is for participants that remain in the same unit but are required to sign a new lease by the property owners. Moving on to Chapter 12 under terminations. Again, this is under family chooses to terminate assistance. We're proposing to add the language must do so in writing. If the family voluntarily withdraws from the program, they must do so in writing. And also adding the language, DMHA will notify the client and the property owner in writing that the request to voluntarily withdraw from the program has been rescinded and the housing assistance payment contract will continue. And this would replace the language that currently is in our admin plan. In such cases, if there is an active housing assistance payment contract with the owner, it would require that if the participant changed their mind and wanted to continue under our program, they would have to get something in writing from the property owner stating that they're in agreement with that. Under 12.2c, which is alternatives to terminating of assistance, we're proposing to add language, upon consideration of alternatives, the DMHA may, on a case-by-case basis, determine at its sole discretion not to terminate assistance. DMHA will consider the following alternatives in making its decision to terminate assistance, and the non-bolded language following that is existing bullet points, and that will give us the opportunity to try to implement some different programs and put systems in place to help participants retain their housing. Under 12.2d, criteria for deciding to terminate assistance, we're proposing to add the following language. DMHA may consider the following factors prior to making its decision to terminate assistance, which would include the seriousness of the case, especially with respect to how it could affect other residents, the extent of participation or culpability of individual family members, including whether a culpable family member is a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking. In the case of drug or alcohol abuse, the DMHA may require the family to submit evidence of the household member's successful completion of a supervised drug or alcohol rehabilitation program. And lastly, the DMHA may take into consideration current participation in a recognized supportive service program. Again, these are efforts to work with our participants to keep their housing assistance. Under 12.2e, we're recommending removing the language that states currently supporting documentation verifying the dates in relation to the reason for denial termination will be required. This is under our VAWA section. We have gotten guidance that from our HUD reps that this language should be removed. So, before I continue any further, is there any questions from the board on the things that I've covered so far, or the public? Okay, moving on, I'll cover Chapter 13, which is owners of, under the Section 8 program. We're under 13.2d, under HAP, contract terms and terminations. We're proposing to add the language, however, at the sole discretion of DMHA, if an owner or an assisted resident is found to be in serious breach of owner obligations under the Housing Assistance Payment HAP contract, and the HAP contract and payments may be terminated immediately. I've and that is in red, the language that we're proposing to add. Under Chapter 14, which is titled Program Integrity, under Part 2, Corrective Measures and Penalties, 14.2a, Family-Caused Errors and Program Abuse, we're proposing adding the language may be extended at the sole discretion of Assisted Housing Properties Administrator, 2, without an approved extension, and 3, if a repayment for each occurrence has been received by DMHA. And that fits into read the 60-day repay period may be extended at the sole discretion of Assisted Housing Properties Administrator. Failure to repay DMHA within 60 days without an approved extension is grounds for terminating of benefits. The family is not eligible for relocation until the repayment has been paid in full. The family will be afforded a total of 4 occurrences of unreported income if a repayment for each occurrence has been received by DMHA. More than 4 occurrences of unreported income are grounds for termination of benefits. Okay, moving on to Chapter 16, Program Administration. Under 16.3c, informal hearings for participants. We propose to remove the following language. When the DMHA determines the following amount of the total tenant payment, tenant rent, number of bedrooms entered on the housing choice voucher of an assisted family who is requesting relocation, the DMHA will notify the participant, individual or family, that they may ask for an explanation of the basis of the DMHA determination, and that if they do not agree with the determination, they may request an informal hearing. We're proposing to strike that and replace it with language, the following language, which states, in addition to the regulatory required informal hearings, DMHA may conduct an informal discussion with the participant, individual or family prior to them requesting an informal hearing. Again, as I explained earlier, this is an effort to work with our clients more on an individual basis and try to afford them opportunities to retain their housing. Under informal hearing procedures, as previously mentioned, if the family is represented by an attorney who comes to the informal hearing, we're just wanting to be able to have prior knowledge of that so we can also have an attorney present. And then finally, under Part 4, which is titled Owner or Family Debts to the PHA, we're proposing adding the language, failure to repay DMHA in full within 60 days without an approved extension. And the language that we're proposing adding is without the approved extension is a grounds for termination of benefits. The 60-day time frame may only be extended at the sole discretion of the Assisted Housing Properties Administrator. So that kind of covers the chapters that I'm going to speak on. Is there any questions or comments from the board regarding any of those? I know that's a lot of information all at once, but any from the public? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Lynch. I supervise the FSS and HCV homeownership program. Chapter 15 covers special housing types, which Marcy covered that there are no changes other than the HCV homeownership program. This is Exhibit 15-1. This covers the Housing Choice Voucher or Section 8 homeownership program plan. The proposed changes are updated numbers of the Section 8 vouchers and public housing units, removing all exhibit references, the document titles will remain, adding language regarding periodic payments of the family's progress in finding and purchasing a home during the time period of homeownership voucher issuance may be required, added required language regarding the purchaser's ability to conduct lead-based paint inspection or risk assessments, added clarifying language regarding lease to purchase agreements, added under environmental requirements section, the units in airport runway clear zones and airfield clear zones require the purchaser be notified. Additional language regarding the HCV home ownership program addendum to residential purchase agreement. This is offered for use as an attachment to the offer to purchase. Added the names of the 4 documents that contain the participant obligations. Added the HCV homeownership HAP recapture language to clarify that DMMHA could recapture HAP provided from this program in cases of fraud or misrepresentation. Added the employment requirement for continued participation in the homeownership program. This includes maintaining at least 30 hours per week if the family is not elderly or disabled. If they don't maintain employment, then they must show a plan to return to work within 90 days. DMMHA will provide linkages and referrals to available resources within the community to assist with employment opportunities. After 6 months, the homeowner may be terminated from the HCV program. And removed program termination section and referenced the admin plan, chapter 12, and the regulations. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Are there any questions or comments from the board? Thank you.
The last piece of the presentations for tonight have to do with the public housing admissions and continued occupancy policy. And we're not going to cover all 16 chapters tonight. We're only going to cover 7. And out of those 7, chapter 1 is just an overview of the program and our plan. It has a brief explanation of the creation of the Housing Authority and our mission statement, and contains information about public housing operations, the history of our programs. And there's only one change to this chapter, and that's the changing of the Public Housing Advisory Board to the Housing Services Board, as you are now. And we made a couple updates on the history section. Chapter 2 for the public housing plan covers fair housing and equal opportunity, and Marcy's already covered that. Chapter 3 is eligibility, and that's already been covered. Chapter 4 are applications, waiting list, and tenant selection. That's already been covered. Chapter 5 is occupancy standards and unit offers. That was previously covered. Chapter 6 we're going to hold until the next meeting. That's on rent determinations. And Chapter 7 is on verifications, and there are no changes to that. So we're done with the public housing presentations for tonight. Are there any comments from the one person left from the public? Sorry. I'm going alone. Carol. Thank you, Carol, for staying. From the board. Thank you.
Seeing none, we need a motion to receive and file the agency plan